Hey, this is Matt from Emery and Bad Christian, and you're listening to the Voice and Verse podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 16 of the Voice and Verse podcast. I'm your host, Evan Lucy, taking you through the stories behind your favorite songs. This week, my guest is Matt Carter, lead guitarist and one of the principal songwriters of the band Emery. Emery formed in Rock Hill, South Carolina back in 2001, but quickly moved to Seattle and fell in with the Tooth and Nail Records crowd. They released their debut album, The Week's End, in 2004 and have been on the road ever since, touring with bands like Haste the Day, Hawthorne Heights, and the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus. The band are currently in the studio recording their 6th studio album, You Were Never Alone, which will be released this fall via Bad Christian, an alternative Christian podcast, blog, and record label they started after leaving Tooth and Nail. I caught up with Matt to talk about the new album, how a heavy-handed producer can in fact be a good thing, and why some of Emery's best-known songs actually started in a way you would not imagine. So, I hope you enjoy this chat with Matt Carter from Emery.
This is the way it goes when you're a part of it. Nervously saying words, little surprising bed. A mark beneath the chin. I've caught you once again. It's in the way you sound, every word and phrase. They leaving me to know how much the meaning weighs. Saying that but meaning this. Using hands for emphasis.
We'll start out by saying that you almost decapitated me at the Blue Note in Columbia, Missouri when I was in college. I think you were on tour with June, and
Yeah.
was that the Hawthorne Heights tour?
Yeah, Hawthorne they were on that tour. June was.
June
That's right.
and Amber Lynn, I think is that
Yeah,
the tour?
it was. That's right. I guess it was June played, and then Amber Lynn, and then us,
Yeah.
and then Hawthorne. I think at that time.
That was when they were touring on their second record, the one that
Yep.
they debuted at number 2 or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a history, even though you didn't know it. I was in the front row, and I remember there was a guitar headed right toward my head. But I'd like to start out with kind of a fun question. Do you remember the very first song that you ever wrote?
I do remember. I mean, if you call it a song, like I remember the first time I would say I created something. Basically, when I was just had a guitar or something. I wouldn't say first song like for a rock band, but I guess I remember that too. So I remember that my sister wrote a song on the piano, and she was like 6 or 7 or something, and I thought it was so weird. I mean, it was just like goofing around. Had some notes, and she made some words to it and everything. I just thought it was so funny that she thought she could write a song. She did it. You wouldn't knock it because it was just an 8-year-old little girl. And I thought that was interesting. And ever since I started listening to music or anything, I just always thought, well, I'm listening to it now, and once I understand it, I'll do it. That's kind of the way I look at stuff. I always feel that way about teachers in school, or even podcasting. Whenever I get into something or listen to it, I think, all right, now I'm learning it, and once I understand it, I'll do it. And so as soon as I could do the guitar a little bit, I made a song. It was just music. I guess it was just instrumental only, and I just put together stuff, and I played it for my mom, and she was not impressed at all. And then
Tough audience.
Yes, she's a tough crowd. Now, she's a big supporter of everything I do, but I remember her not being that impressed. But I was just super stoked that something I came up with something, and it existed. It went from not being, like you said, to being, and I thought that was just really kind of a good feeling. And then I remember the first song I wrote for a band. It was just basically I was just trying to copy "Tired of Sex" by Weezer on Pinkerton. I just wrote a song that felt as much as I could like that, and then somebody else worked on it, and then somebody sang on it. Actually, Devin sang on it. The first band I was ever in, Devin was the singer of, and it turned into a song. I mean, it exists. It's recorded somewhere today, so I think that's pretty neat.
What was that song called?
The song is called Kafka's Lament, is the name of it, and it was we had another friend named Ronnie who was a bass player, and he was he studied English and liked writing, and he was all into literary stuff. So we told him, well, you write the lyrics. So he wrote this song, lyrics to the song about Franz Kafka's book. I don't remember what his book's called, and where he turns the main character in the book turns into a beetle.
Yeah, the Metamorphosis.
The Metamorphosis, that's right. So it was based on that. So it's like these intellectual lyrics to this silly kind of Weezer sounded song, and then Devin sang it. So Devin, I think Devin came up with the melody, and Ronnie had the lyrics, and I wrote all the music to it, and that was our first song, and it's pretty good.
How old were you guys then?
I must have been 16. I was probably 17 or 18 at the time.
Okay, and
that's when I started playing music. I didn't start till really late.
Did you join Emery shortly thereafter, or when the timeline did Emery come in?
I guess it all happened pretty quick. I didn't start playing guitar or anything until I was 16 or 17, and then went to college. And so as soon as we started playing guitar, we made a band immediately and started playing cover songs. And Devin would do that. He would come over on Friday nights with some other people, and we would just play in my parents' garage. And so we were already doing that, and then when we started college, we went to different colleges, but we would still come back to my house and play music on the weekends. So that was our first band, and it was called Simply Wayne's. And then we were in college, and we would play at bars and at frat parties and stuff like that. And then that's where we met up with Joey and Toby, who were trying to do a band of their own. So Devin and I from our band, and Joey and Toby, who were trying to make a band, got to be really good friends, and then essentially that's what Emery was started with, the four of us.
And that was in South Carolina, right?
It was in South Carolina in 2000. I guess I started playing guitar and made a band immediately in 96, 97, and then we were doing what was actual Emery stuff by 99.
Okay, wow. So you've been at it for a while now. I know that the Week's End just hit its 10-year. It turns 10 this year, which is crazy.
Yep, it is crazy.
All right, well, I guess we'll just go there. Like, what did you guys want to do in that record, and what was the process of writing songs you'd been a band for a while by that point, if you said you would...
Well, yeah, but it was, we had a crazy, like I said, we didn't start doing music. None of us started doing music till later in life. We didn't grow up in a place where people were skateboarding and nobody had guitars or anything. Where I grew up, we grew up in the middle of almost in the woods, and we were just kind of late getting to any of that. Like, true story is Toby and I bought our first skateboards together and learned how to ollie when we were in a junior in college.
Oh, wow.
Like, we didn't grow up around skate culture or punk music or anything like that. So we had a band when Devin and I played Weezer and Nirvana and Green Day covers at a Halloween party at our high school. That was, as far as I knew, the only band at our high school, and the only band that had ever been at our high school at the time. It just didn't exist.
Right.
So we got going pretty late. So we were in college, and then decided that we just loved it so much, this music stuff, and this punk was the first concerts we'd ever been to. We first started playing music and doing all that stuff, and we were like 19 and 20 years old at the time in college before we got into it. So we were so in love with it and so excited at that time that we just said, all right, this is it. We want to do music, but we weren't any good at it. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have anything. Like, we were just getting all these influences from all over the place, and we discovered indie music, Devin and Toby and I, at the same time, just out of nowhere, as adults, essentially. So we decided we wanted to do Emery, and that's why we decided to leave where we were from and move to Seattle, because surely they have stuff going on out there. Surely we would work really hard and be really aggressive, and we'd leave everything else behind and be able to work totally on music. So that's what we did. And so, yeah, we were a band from that time when we started Emery, before we were even remotely good. We probably weren't any good until about 2005, to tell you the truth. Like, at playing instruments and haven't been able to perform and even like dress halfway decent. I mean, not that that's the most important thing, but we didn't even have a clue about anything to do with style or performance. or we weren't even that good at playing music, to tell you the truth. But we just loved it so much, and so when we moved to Seattle, we would play and we practiced, and we all lived together, and we all shared money and toothpaste, and we just worked jobs and put all our money toward the band, and we would just try to play shows and do stuff. So it took us that long of doing it all day, every day, to get to 2004 or 5 before we really made any real progress.
Sure. So when you're a young band and you're still trying to figure it out, like, how does that translate to the songwriting? What were those kind of experiences like?
Well, there's this other part of it, which is when you're, I use the phrase embrace ignorance. I think that's where most people are at their best time creatively, they're kind of maybe ignorant and even unskilled, but you have a lot to say and you have these ideas and you're really not inhibited. So through the midst of learning how to perform or even play music or communicate really clearly, there was these really out of the blue, ignorant, crazy ideas that we would put together that we didn't know better than to not do. And Toby's the main lyricist, and he's really talented at that, and so that came naturally to him in some ways, although he's gotten a lot better over time. And so we were really free in that time to just try anything. Like, what if we did a breakdown? What if this part was really pretty? What if we just changed time signatures whenever we want to? I mean, we just didn't know any better. We weren't that skilled, and so that's the way that's just the way that stuff came out. It came out over time, and then as we did it, we found stuff that worked better, and the stuff that worked good and audiences responded to stuck around, and the stuff that we were doing that was long and boring 7-minute songs with a bunch of instrumentals, eventually we cut because it wasn't working. You know what I mean?
And I'm sure
that's how we got to where it was.
I'm sure when you work with somebody like Ed Rose, you learn pretty fast, what's good and what's not, and how to do things.
Definitely. Like that was one of the first thing they did. Like we sent him our demos, and then when we got there to record, he had chopped them down unbelievable short. And we're like, what did you do with the song? And he took it. We're like, what about that part? He just looked at us deadpan and said, it's gone. Done. And our first demo, the shortest song was 4.5 minutes, and then they were all longer than that, 5, 6, 7, 8-minute songs, and they were not. I mean, there was some good stuff in them, but they needed to chop down considerably. And Ed Rose was very, very, very good at that. He was very authoritative, and I think he picked up on the fact that we were super green, and he wasn't even honestly, he wasn't even nice to us at all, almost at any point during making the record or anything. He was kind of not standoffish or mean, but it was just business. I mean, he was just doing his job like a general or something. He's like, we're working hard here. This needs to go. You should try it this way. It just was there was nothing to it. He was just get the work done. He got us where we needed to be for sure. So he had a big hand in. We thought producers were like, oh, they come up with all this creative stuff and they're going to do all this stuff. But all he did was make us cut stuff that didn't need to be there and make it more succinct and digestible, and he did a great job of that.
Sure. Well, I feel like when you're faced with a situation like that, whether it's your mom not being impressed with that song that you wrote, or a producer who's like this part is bad, it just kind of forces you to want to win them over eventually and work harder and harder to gain that approval. It's that tough love that's just kind of forces you to be better.
Yeah, you have to do stuff bad, and then once you do it bad, then you don't give up. That's what I mean by ignorance. Like if you do something, it's worth doing crappy, and then you go, wow, that failed. And then you either give up at that time or you get better because of it, or you work harder to win other people over, or your bandmates, or you got to take some action there. And a lot of people give up, but if you're excited and ignorant enough, you really will get somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
Over time.
I think Walls is probably your most beloved song still to this day, but first song on the first record, what do you remember about writing that one? How did that one kind of take shape?
There's a ton. I mean, there's an early version that exists of that's longer and doesn't even have screaming in, I guess, really in the whole song. Like, I think we have a version of Waltz that doesn't even have screaming.
Oh.
And that song evolved over a really long period of time, and we had a format that we were playing it. Now, I guess it did have some screaming, but it didn't have it in the beginning or the current format that it is now at all. And so it evolved over time, and we had this long, drawn-out part in the middle instead of these knuckles break before they bleed part. Mm. We had this long, drawn-out, just slow chord progression with these ahs. It just went ah for a long time in the middle there, and it didn't have screaming at the beginning, and it didn't have the same breakdown at the end. And so we wrote that these knuckles break before they bleed part right kind of as we were getting ready to go into the studio. And then the week before we went to the studio, we had this idea, like, what if you did a part and we went like halftime, but no, not like really halftime, like where it was gapped out this far. Because at that time, I'm not saying we invented that, but I think maybe we weren't familiar with songs or parts where you'd have that much empty space and that slow of a beat.
Sure.
Like that was really obnoxious to us. We thought it was just funny. Like, wow, that's like really obnoxious, because breakdowns were evolving, I guess, at that time. And So we just thought that was just a really obnoxious thing to do, and we just laughed about it and said, let's go for it. Let's just do it. And so that happened the week before we went in the studio, and then the night before we recorded the vocals in the studio, Toby said, hey, let's do screaming at the beginning, too, because it just had an instrumental beginning. It didn't even have screaming. It didn't say, are you listening? None of that was even there. It was just the guitar part. And so Toby's like, I think it needs vocals, because as we were going through those couple of weeks with Ed Rose, he basically chopped out all our instrumental parts, and we started realizing that vocals were the most important thing. And so we kind of got the wind of that, and Toby's like, well, let's just put vocals everywhere. Let's put them all over the place. And so we kind of got hyper with that, and one of the ideas was, well, let's just put screaming during that instrumental part at the beginning of Waltz, and then Are You Listening? And we'll put that even before it comes in. And so that was a pretty big deal. Like, had that not been there, that song would not be near as good, you know. And John Frazier from Tooth and Nail says he thought it was just remarkable. He always notes that it's, you know, the coolest thing is that it's the first song on the record. It starts with screaming, and it says, "Are you listening?" Like, we weren't thinking of any. That wasn't the intent. In fact, we didn't even want to put that song first. But I mean, what a way to start your first record! Looking back on it, that's awesome. Like that, I'm so glad that it by chance worked out that way. So,
absolutely. And I think, you know, when you hear that song, you guys play it live, the crowd. There's two parts where the crowd really gets into it. It's the beginning, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The Are You Listening? And then the knuckles, when these knuckles break before they bleed.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that those two parts weren't even in the original song.
Oh no, not even at all, not even close. And it almost didn't have a breakdown at the end either. So I mean, it was just, you know, those three things are just, like I said, over time, the good stuff stayed or got better, and you kept trying new ideas, and the bad stuff got stripped away. So the whole week's end is that way. Those songs we had played thousands of times, and we played them in a room together over and over, and kept writing and kept adding and kept taking stuff away. And so all the songs were developed like that, and no other record we've done has been that way. Like every other record, we wrote and recorded it.
Sure.
That's it. And like The Question, we went in and wrote in a month, and then recorded it in the next month, and then they put it out 2 or 3 months after that. So, because we were on tour from the week's end. By the week's end, we literally spent 3 or 4 years practicing, writing, trying to play, learning how to play our instruments. How are we supposed to sing? Does this work? Does that work? So that's kind of interesting part of that record.
So would you say making The Question was easier in terms of writing the songs?
It was a lot easier, and it was a lot more fun. That's for sure. I mean, the week's end, we weren't signed when we made it, which is what made it really intense. Like, we saved up money, convinced Ed Rose to produce it, put all our money together, drove out to Kansas, and paid for 9 days to record. And so we recorded that record in 9 days, and it was just the most intense time of my life. It was like everything was riding on it. We've been doing this for 2 or 3 years. Didn't know if we had any future. We hadn't been we had no backup plan, no plan B. So recording that record, we didn't know anything about studio recording. We didn't know if it would even help us move farther in our career or get signed. So that was like a scary, intense, like really hard work time doing the week's end. And then by the time we did The Question, we were like a real band. Like, people knew us. We knew whatever we really felt like, well, whatever we do now, people are going to like, because it seems like people like our music, and now we know what we're doing. So this should be kind of a breeze, and it kind of was. So we just said, this works, that doesn't work. We weren't overthinking it. We weren't too up in our heads about it. We're just like, yeah, we write songs like this. Let's just do it. So we got in a room and wrote it in a month, and then we went in the studio, and we had, instead of having 9 days to record, we had a month, 6 weeks, in a nice studio in Seattle with Aaron Sprinkle, who is not like Ed Rose at all. He's the opposite. And it was awesome. So, I mean, it was the most fun, probably one of the most fun times of my whole life was recording The Question. I mean, it was just too much fun.
And I imagine that having toured so much for the week's end, you know, you kind of learn from playing live every night what works and what doesn't, in terms of like, hey, maybe on the second record we can do this because the kids are really responding to this sort of thing live. Did that kind of thing factor in?
Yeah, it did, but there's a lot of moments in that record that wouldn't translate live that we wouldn't have known until after we made the record, put it out, and toured it. Like, oh, well, you know what I mean? So there's some things we knew going into songwriting that worked good, but there's also, none of that record was tested. Like, there's something about when you play something in front of people, then all of a sudden, or even if you play it for them on a record, but you know, when you have something created for you, that's one thing, and then when you play it for other people, you're like, oh, I see how they're hearing that. I didn't anticipate that. So there's some things that probably we would have done differently, and the record probably could have been, I mean, I don't mean that to sound disrespectful to ourselves, but it might could have been better, in my opinion, had we gotten to test the material or play it for people. but that's not the reality, and really no record since have we gotten to really test the material. I don't guess you can do that. I mean, how are you supposed to play 5 or 6 new songs live over and over again for a crowd? I mean, you just don't have the opportunity.
Right, because when you go to a show, you don't want to see bands play new songs. You want to hear them play the songs that you fell in love with.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like you can go play a bunch of new songs that nobody's even heard, that aren't even recorded, just to see how they go over. Like, you can't do that when we go to, when we're playing in Orange County. You can't just go down there and test new material or anything. So I don't know. But yeah, the question, recording that record was the most, I really do think it's probably the most fun time of my whole life.
Is there any song that kind of stands out to you that was special in terms of the way it was written? Maybe something that started as one thing but ended up as something else along the way?
On the question, I think the biggest surprise for us, the most satisfying, fun thing probably on that record was working on listening to Freddie Mercury, because it had no structure. It just didn't make any sense. We put a bunch of parts together, and we composed a lot of it in the studio, and then we had to leave straight away for a tour before the song was done, and then Sprinkle finished it, and he did all that orchestration at the end. It was just guitar, bass, and drums when we had left the studio, and then he did these keyboard parts, and he put it, and it's not even like a million keyboard parts, but what he did there is just really makes that, it's just insane with just the bells and the little keyboard parts, really brings that part to life. And that was the most pleasant thing to ever hear, something that we did and left and thought was good, and then hear it improved that much by just something that he was able to do. That was incredible.
That's always really risky when producers do that, because there's that famous story about Taking Back Sunday when they did Tell All Your Friends, and then they got the final copy of the record, and a bunch of things had changed, and like the tempo in an intro had been sped up to where it sounded like it was a MIDI part instead of just like an ominous piano part. So anytime somebody does something when you're not there, you kind of have to, are they gonna? Well, I hope they're gonna like this.
I totally agree and understand that, but this wasn't final. This was just, we had to go. We're like,
sure,
Sprinkle, can you just finish this? We trust you, because we did, because we were super on the same page, so we weren't having, it's not like he wasn't trying to make us do stuff we didn't want to do. He was just doing like he was a member of the band, is kind of the way it felt at that time. And he just sensed, do you like it? Do you not like it? And he would take it out or whatever. It was just something that he said came to him as he was just preparing the song for mix. So he put it down, and we loved it. And also, it's, I don't know, Sprinkle's just a special talent guy. So I wouldn't let any producers change a bunch of stuff, but he's different. I mean, he's just special talent.
For sure. I think you could hear that he's on so many incredible records. I mean, the Acceptance record that he did was just, it's
the same way. They had producer problems when they went and got those songs remixed. That's a big, it's a story as well. They changed, that song Different that's on there?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So that song, they had it remixed with somebody big. I can't remember who it was. Or no, they went and re-recorded the song because they were just doing all the tracks with Sprinkle, and then the major label wanted them to spend more money and go to, I can't remember who it is. It's Howard Benson probably, or somebody like that. And he wanted to do this full. It just made it's just way worse if you've heard both versions. The Sprinkle one's just, that whole record and everything Sprinkle did on it is super clear evidence of how much he gets it when you hear the same song by the same band with two different producers, and one of them is supposed to cost 10 times as much, and it's just not near as good.
The thing, I don't think Howard Benson will ever be a guest on my podcast, so I feel confident in talking about this, but I've heard nothing but the records that Howard Benson makes sound really good, but I've heard nothing but just kind of bad things about the process and the way he makes records. He has
I think I've heard the same thing.
Like, he has an engineer who does all the instruments, and the engineer is not allowed to give his opinion about stuff. He's just it's an old school approach, and it's rooted in some really good wisdom and common sense, because the opposite of that is inefficient situation and too many cooks in the kitchen. And it's good to have engineers, and it's good for the producer to be able to look at the big picture and not worry about drum editing all the time or whatever it is. So that's okay, but it's kind of an old school approach, and I think it has some big drawbacks depending on the band and the personalities. So yeah. I've heard some bad stories about him, but also he's made some incredible stuff that I couldn't imagine being any better. For sure.
either. So.
And everybody talks about his prowess and his ability to really get good vocal performances out of people. I think that's kind of like the thing that he's known for. He lets everybody else handle the other stuff, and he just focuses on the vocal parts.
Yep.
Let's see. So what was like the process? You had 6 guys in the band at this point. So like, what was you have six opinions coming in, and you've got to pick through them. Was it a democracy, or how did things get done?
Well, we've done well. We've talked about the question of the week's in. Every record we've done has been different, and it's been different in that regard. So the most democratic we ever were was at the week's end time, because we worked so tightly on it. The question we had to streamline a little bit more, and it was just like, well, Toby wrote this, Devin wrote this, Matt wrote this. So by the time we were in the swing of the question, it was pretty much Devin and Toby and I are composers, and we write. And so that we kind of made it a little bit more. And Dave was new with the band at that time. And so it wasn't that Joel wasn't doing anything bad or good on the bass. It's just he wasn't really trying to write songs. So we would let the person who had the idea for the song see it through, is the way we approached it. And so with that scenario, Devin is really talented at arranging and drums and guitar and singing and writing songs. So when Devin would write a song, he pretty much could see it through and coach everybody through his vision all the way through. But he does it a little bit slower. And so Devin wound up doing a less percentage of Devin songs, you would call them, and that's the ones that he sings. Mm-hmm. Whereas Toby has almost no guitar, bass, or drum or arranging skill, even though he's gotten better over time, and he purely will pick up a guitar, put his fingers in a place that he doesn't know the names of the notes, and do something weird and do something ultra catchy, and it's like, whoa. And then I'm like, give me that. Let me have that. And then, a week later, he can't remember how to play it, and I have to show him how he played it or whatever it is, And so I would, and then I compose. I'm not a lyricist, and I don't write as much vocal melody, so I compose almost fully, starting from the arrangement point of view. So Toby and I naturally, you just put our 2 songs together, and you get that. That's just what Emery kind of sounds like in a general way. So I have hyper-arranged, organized stuff, and then he does really hooky stuff, and then we just marry those together. So that kind of is the basic formula for an Emery song, is some hybrid of stuff that Toby creates and I create, and then we make it work somehow.
Where do you think that, like, from there, your personal songwriting ability has improved over time? Do you find yourself being able to do things now that you weren't able to do back then?
As far as songwriting goes, well, it's harder to write songs now because, like, our influences have changed. We're older. What are we even doing? The genre has changed. I mean, there's just so much more to think about and second guess. It's just we don't have that. It's scarier to write songs now, and you feel like you have more to lose. So I'd say it's harder to write a song in a way, or it's less satisfying. Maybe, I'm not sure, but definitely we could do it a lot faster, like a lot more efficiently, a lot better. But judging if it's good, or is this really what we want to say? Is this really what we want to do? That overthinking it becomes the problem now. But as far as like to do the style of composing and arranging, I could do it very, very quickly. A lot of stuff, like if we wanted to take a song I heard on the radio and arrange it in the style of Emery, we could do that very efficiently.
I smell a covers album in the future.
Yeah, I guess so, but the only problem with that is when you go to cover a song, you feel like, oh, now you have to force it to be heavier than it is, or do a breakdown, or do a screaming part over a song that you think is good. So that's never been satisfying to us at all. Like, we've thought about it, people ask us to make this song sound like Emery, but that's not satisfying at all. Like, it doesn't feel good to do that, because I'd rather just do the other person's song the way they do it, or some quirky way. But it doesn't feel that good to cover songs and try to sound like Emery. For some reason, that I don't like it.
Sure. Well, I think you touched on something that's really important. Is that as you guys have been a band for so long, like, the definition of what you think Emery is changes as you get older, and as your influences expand, and as you just maybe don't want to do Walls 12 times on a record. So how do you balance that your desire to do what you want to do with what your fans maybe expect from you. Does that ever kind of creep into the songwriting process? Like, oh, like the fans, like we don't have a song like this on the record. And
No, but that's the scary part about it is like, I love all of our music. I can't write. I mean, I really wouldn't write stuff I didn't like. However, we've gotten really good at writing the kind of music that is us. And so even if we wanted to do a different kind of music, I don't know if we could do it that well anyway. But at the same time, I'm not constantly listening to new hardcore, emo, and screamo bands. That's just not where I spend my time creatively investing in other bands. So it just leaves you in this weird place. I'm 34. I'll be 35 next month, and when I go to do stuff that seems natural to me that I like, I go, whoa. Why am I doing this music? Like, why would that be? I don't even listen to stuff like this, but it's what comes out just because it's what I'm used to writing and playing. So it just feels weird. But I still, when I write a screamo part, I like it. I think it's good. I just don't like it when anybody else does it at this point.
Well, you've got another out. You and Toby did a record together, which is radically different sounding than I think anything you did in Emery. Where did that come from? Was it just a desire to kind of have no rules and just kind of be able to do whatever you wanted, even if
it was we write music all the time. Sometimes you'll be on the guitar or on the piano or something, you go, oh, that's really cool, I like it. It makes you feel good when you discover it, but then you go, well, I just don't see that being an Emery song, or that just doesn't fit. So over the years, we kind of accumulated, and that record's all over the place for that reason.
Sure.
Just accumulated stuff. It's like, I wish we could do that. And we thought about trying to force an Emery record to be that way, or do you try to sneak that stuff in, but it just didn't make sense. We thought maybe we would record a soft Emery record, because to us, it still sounds like us writing, but it doesn't sound like us writing Emery that people know. So we weren't sure if we should force that into Emery, so we just decided, hey, if this is the kind of stuff that Matt and Toby write that's not Emery, let's just release it also, and we'll just call it something else, so we won't have to make anybody say they hate it or love it or we're changing direction or sold out. We just additionally will release another thing, and we'll just put it under our name so people can like it or not. But it's not like I hate that band. It's just if we put out a new Matt and Toby record and it's just all electronica, you won't say that band anything. You just say, well, Matt and Toby are doing electronica now. Or it's just like if Lenny Kravitz puts out a dance record, it's still Lenny Kravitz, right? So we'll just attach it to our names directly, we figured, and see what happens.
Sure. And like you said, you guys have your style that you kind of have patented over the past, X amount of years, and you definitely hear it, like Life of the Party, like musically doesn't sound like an Emery song, but it still kind of got that melodic sensibility, and you can kind of hear, like, if you dress this up the right way, it could kind of be an Emery song. So that's cool that you don't lose sight of your style, but you're able to... Yeah,
it was essentially a demo that didn't make it on an Emery song to an Emery album. It's like got abandoned at some point. But the idea was, and then so we said, well, let's just do it a way that's not try to force it to be Emery. But yeah, that's probably my favorite song on that record. I love it. It's so much fun. But we could never do it with Emery. It just wouldn't make sense.
Sure. You write on guitar, write on piano. What other kind of instruments do you play?
The drums is my favorite place to write to start a song almost every time. And I'm not a drummer that could perform. Like if I had to go fill in for a band on drums, it would be a disaster. But I love composing on drums. They've always been my favorite kind of instrument. I've just never spent a lot of time on it, like practicing or chops or whatever. But when I go sit on the drums, I can get excited really quick. And again, it's because I'm kind of ignorant at it and it's not my thing. So I think outside the box when I sit on the drums. So I'll just ignorantly do something that feels aggressive or interesting or quirky, and then I'm off and running. Then it's like, oh, okay, throw some guitar on it. But when I have to start on a guitar, it's intimidating to say, play an awesome guitar part and then build a song around it, because I'm so familiar with the guitar that when it's hard to impress myself on the guitar. But if I take an instrument that I don't play as well, I can impress myself much easier. So I'm like, ooh, did you hear what I did? And now I'm excited, and now everything else falls into place.
So what have you written on drums? What's something that people would know on an Emery record that kind of started as a drum idea?
Oh, probably, let's see, we'll just go through.
Or are there too many to list?
Yeah, too many to list, but let me see if I can come up with a good example. Like So Cold I Could See My Breath is that way.
Oh,
I like, it's just a drum beat in the beginning that feels pumped up. It's just exciting, and then in the middle part, it just people do play on the rim and do weird stuff a lot more now than they used to. But I was always really excited when drummers would hit stuff that wasn't a drum, like the side of a stand or the rim of a thing or a shell or whatever. And so that part in the verse of that song, how it's kind of empty and you can hear that part, was exciting to me. It's not profound, like I said, but to me, I was like, ooh, that's fun. And then I just put two chords over it and then made the chords pretty and harmonized them. That's easy, right? And then made it so, but I already had the exciting feel to it. It had like this cool groove for the verse and then a pumped up intro, and then you're off and running. Now you can put a song, and then you get a little help from Toby and say, all right, and do this. And then, my goal is to always try to make like sonic landscapes that will excite Toby. So either he comes with an exciting idea vocally, or I set a mood that makes him excited, and then therefore I know he'll write good vocals to it. It's pretty matter of fact. If I write a boring part, he'll write boring vocals over it. It's just the way it goes.
sure. You got to have all the pieces there.
Yeah, so my job is to get everything dynamic and fun and exciting and, like inspiring, so that once everything else that comes after that will be likewise inspired. That's the way I see it.
Do you have any other creative outlets that aren't songwriting?
Music? Are we talking about musically?
No, I mean anything. I mean, writing novels or poetry or any kind of other thing like.
Well, I mean, all the stuff that we do now with our Bad Christian stuff, I would say is creative in nature. So our podcast and our blog, we did write an ebook too. So yeah, I think at some point I feel confident about creating in general, and I think it's communicating that I'm really into. I think music is a way to communicate. And so, yeah, like at this point, Toby and I and Joey are doing a lot of exploring with other ways of communication. So I'd say our podcast is creative, but then again, that's just us kind of talking.
Yeah. Well, the podcast
is not that crazy, but
the podcast is great. I just listened to the Stephen Christian one last night, and I did their AP cover story a few years back, and just a great talented group of guys, and they're so humble and they're so grateful for everything they have. So it was cool to hear him on your show. But as you do this, and you've got obviously a community of other musicians that you've come to know as you have toured for so long. Do you pick up little things here and there from them, little tricks that you can then kind of keep in your arsenal and use for Emery stuff?
From like creatively from other musicians? Yeah. I mean, jealousy is a really good driver of that. When you see somebody else and they make a record and then they put out a solo record, then they put out the next band record so fast and like stuff like that, you go, how do they do it? And so learning from other people's productivity is for sure one thing. I feel like we've been unproductive and not worked hard enough, but in some ways not. So it's inspiring to see other people do that, and people that you want a specific example, and I guess I would say, let's see. I want to give you a specific example here of somebody. Let's see. I'm blanking on it, but I picked up a lot of creative tips, obviously from Aaron Sprinkle, working with him.
Sure.
And then I worked for him and engineered a bunch of records for about 2 or 3 years in a row. So I've learned more from him as an individual than probably anybody else, both musically and technically. So yeah, you're always picking up stuff. On tour, you don't learn that much musically because you just see the same band playing the same stuff every night. So on tour, you learn stuff about how to tour well, or how to make your guitar tech do a good job, or what's a good way to set up your stage. You pick up that kind of stuff all the time. But you being around people writing songs, that's most people are pretty private about that in some sense. I don't like to write songs in front of people. That's really nice.
Well, you are making a record that was funded by your fans.
That's right.
Which we can talk about. Which is upcoming. Do you have a release date for that? I know it's still kind of up in the air, but are things?
It'll be in the fall. Kind of thing. I don't think it'll be out until probably November is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
That it'll be, but I would say we're wrapping it up. We're approaching the end of the recording of the record. So that's just where we're at now, and we want to do it the best we can. it's much harder than ever before with the amount of kids we have and trying to do the Bad Christian stuff and the podcast. It's really hard to focus to be as productive at just recording music. Like on the other albums, I mean, there's been tons of times, almost every album we had done up until the last one or two, where when we were working on an album, I'd work on an album for like 14 hours a day.
Sure.
Just, why not? And that's not ever going to happen again. So like now I can work in chunks, and I have to have the chunks scheduled and get the guitar in tune and really hopefully it's set up right, and then hopefully I'm feeling good, and then my 3-hour time of chunk of time, hopefully I'll get 2 guitar tracks done or something. You know what I mean? And if I don't, well, that stinks. So that's hard. It's harder.
Yeah, especially with something that's so creative and it just kind of ebbs and flows. You never know when inspiration is going to strike. So to have to kind of compartmentalize that and block out time, I imagine can probably be kind of not conducive to a creative thing.
Yep.
But you probably have it's the only way you can get things done at this point. So it's just kind of
it's kind of just is what it is. It forces you in some ways to make decisions faster, not waste a bunch of time. And I am a lot better at playing my instrument than I was 5 and 10 years ago. So I noticed that it's kind of satisfying when I do decide what I'm going to play, and I just play it and it goes down and it was played well. I go, all right, like that. I would say I'm impressing myself, but I feel satisfied when I track now. I don't feel insecure about it, or I don't need another person to tell me is it good enough or whatever. I like it when I put down me playing and it sounds like me and it's in tune and it's in time. That's a good feeling right now.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the new record, you did a was it Pledge Music, or I can never keep all the platforms straight.
Indiegogo is the platform. Yep.
So you had a lot of people contribute to do this, which is great because it's a vote of confidence for your band. Given it's 10 years from your first record, that's incredible. Most bands don't make it past a few years, let alone.
I never thought that we would be here. I'll tell you the truth on that.
Let alone.
I didn't think that far ahead, but yeah, I couldn't imagine we'd be here. So yeah, it is impressive.
So when you've got that aspect of it, like it's not a label putting up money; it's kids who believe in your band. Does that change? Does that put more pressure on you as a writer to like write even better songs because you don't want to let these kids down who are personally kind of funding your project?
Yes. I mean, it puts a little bit more pressure on like the business side of it to do it good, not mess up, not be too late with it in that sense. But songwriting wise, it's I don't feel pressure. I never felt pressured by the label. So just for the record, I never felt like the label wants you to do a certain thing and you can't let them down or anything like that. We've always felt artistic freedom. I still think we feel that way. And there's a good part of the confidence that you have to have as an artist that just says, whatever I make, whatever we do is the right thing. Like you have to rest in that at the end of the day. Like we got here amazingly that we're here because of the fans liking what we were doing. So you just have to trust that your instincts are what it is that they like anyway. So I think they're going to like what we do because that they just seem to in general. So that's where the confidence comes from. And so I rest in that pretty well. But I think it's a little bit more intense knowing that the fans ultimately have funded this record. Yeah. Like if this one's a dud, that's a big bummer because it looks like we just convinced people to give us money and we didn't really work hard at it, which I assure you is not the case. But even if it looks like that, that would be really a bummer.
Sure. I mean, that's a big number. You had a goal of $50,000 and you raised $110,815. That's a crazy amount of money.
It is a crazy amount of money, and it's so easy to spend that amount of money. I thought 50,000 would be great, and then we blew past that, and then to the 100,000, and now we've got it budgeted out where that money's going, and it's crazy. Like I thought, like we're gonna spend that money almost all of it on real stuff. Like along with it, it's like okay, this record could really be something. How much should we spend on advertising? $10,000, $20,000, $30,000? Would it be worth it? I don't know, but it's awesome. I mean, it's more money than we would have had if we took an advance from the label to make the record. So we already have more money in hand, but we have a duty to spend that in the same way that a label would have, like do marketing plan, hire people, do publicity. We really got to do it right. So that part is more pressuring than the songwriting itself.
Because in a way you can look at it like this is just one record, but if you've got the money and the advertising to push it places, that could set up, you to be in a really good spot for the next record, or the next one, and the next one after that. So it's
because in crowdfunding, it's like, oh well, the band's cashing out. They're going to try and make a bunch of money, put out one final dud, and then retire into the sunset. That's some people think that, and some bands do that. But what if we could put out a record and it's better than our last one, and we could sell more than our last one and be an even more involved band and do the band even more? And what if? I mean, that, like, how much is that worth investing and trying? That is what we want to do. I mean, I can't promise that we can do a better job of marketing and stuff than tooth and nail, but if the record's good enough and we work hard at it, and I think we're pretty good at our promotions and marketing and business stuff, I think we can do a great job with this on the label side and the band side and make, is it possible for a band's sixth record to do better than their fourth and fifth? I think it is, and that's our goal. So we'll see.
I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, it's crazy to see a band like Green Day. Now, obviously, they're an anomaly because they were just like arena size big twice in a career, which never happens. But there was that lull in the middle where Warning happened, and they were kind of just like, I think, left for dead by a lot of people. So anything can happen in this business. The unpredictability of it is exciting and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Well, I know the only hope that, not maybe anybody, but I know the only hope that we would have is to connect more with our fans, to service them more, to pay more attention to them, to do more stuff direct, because when we do that, we do a better job of it. Because we spent the middle of our career saying, well, we have labels and managers and agents. I mean, what do you want me to do? And then not doing anything, just hanging out. And so now we work our asses off every day. I mean, we talk to our distribution company and setting up our own interviews and figuring out how to promote a record and do it. We do so much more engaged work now. I think it's our fans really like that. They feel much more connected. And I think that's the only hope anybody has these days. But it's not. I don't even think that's dismal. I think it's awesome. If we could have started our career over, I would have spent all our time growing our core fan base more and not just worried about selling a bunch of 99-cent downloads to, you know what I mean? That's fine. That's our fans are like, I mean, we have a great engaged fan base, and I'm thankful for it. And so that's who we want to serve going forward. I'm not worried about getting selling 1 million of anything,
Well, now you got to find a way to ship out all those rewards, which I'm sure is going to be quite the process to go through.
Yeah, I think we're going to do a pretty good job of it. We have some good stuff, and with a Bad Christian, we have some people that work for us paid and some volunteers, and we have some good systems in place. So I think we'll probably do above average in that department, but we'll see.
Okay, awesome.
Sorry in advance to anybody whose stuff's going to be late or the wrong size. It will happen, I'm sure.
You can give them somebody else's name to blame for that.
Yeah.
We talked a lot. Let's get you out of here on this. Where do you want to push yourself as a songwriter going forward? Not only on this record, but other ventures that you may go to, or whatever musical stuff's in your future.
I think, given the fact that we have a awesome fan base of both Matt and Toby, Bad Christian, and Emery, I feel super supported in a way that my only goal now will be to create more, faster, more prolifically, so to speak. I believe that we can be efficient and put out more content more often, not 2 years between records. I think we can put out an acoustic record, or this record, a Matt and Toby record, an Emery record. And so I want to push myself to simply do the creating, instead of overthink it or make it perfect. And if we want to make a 3-song EP, then we can do that. We're not on a label. We don't have to worry about traditional cycles. So we definitely are going to challenge ourselves, or at least me personally, just to force yourself to do the creating. I think we've taken these 10 years of developing skills, and now it'd be a shame to stop using them now. So we're going to use them more than ever, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's so cool that the internet has allowed people to do that. Think about the bands that I and probably you loved growing up. If they had that freedom to put out music whenever they wanted to, versus when the label said they could go in and record something, I think it would have been just extremely exciting And
yeah, I don't think we figured out all the ways that it's going to be exciting yet. Like somebody's going to come up with. I'm sure everybody's thinking of ideas as we speak. Put out one song a month forever, or put out 3 songs at a time this way, or make a Christmas album every year and it's free. I mean, you can do anything you want to these days, and so I can't wait for more people other than us to keep coming up with great ideas, and I hope we can contribute to a new era in music. Like, what are we going to do with this freedom and ability that we have with the internet and independence? What are we going to do with it? I can't wait to find out.
And then when somebody else comes up with a really great idea, also you can just kind of take that and make that
steal
your own too.
I'm paying attention to everybody out there. I'm going to steal it, whatever they come up with, and make it our own. But yeah, no, I hope we can contribute to how the business of music goes in the future. I'd love to invent or innovate there, but I'm also for sure paying attention and borrowing from other people that are smart and doing new things. That's the name of the game.
Absolutely. Why don't you let people know where they can find out about you and Emery and Bad Christian and everything you've got going on?
Okay. Anything you want to find out about us, you could just go to badchristian.com and you should link up pretty easily there. Emery's Facebook is a good thing. I think you can't miss us on Google if you just type in Emery or Bad Christian. So, yeah, all our stuff's there. Podcast, band, whatever.
You had a good SEO idea back in the day by not spelling it like the college.
Yes, I didn't realize that. No, I think we named ourselves after an individual person that had the name Emery, so we didn't have to make that choice. But yeah, you are right. They would have been somebody to compete with. But there is a hockey player named Emery, Ray Emery.
Ray Emery. Yep.
Yeah, and then Gareth Emery is like a remix DJ kind of guy. So I'm sure that both of those, I think they probably hate us overall, and I don't think we have good feelings back mutually for competing in search rankings.
Maybe you can get some hockey tickets out of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. This has been really fun. Good luck with everything, and when you guys make it to the East Coast again, I will be there in D.C.
In D.C., right on.
Well, that is going to wrap it up for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed that. I would like to thank Matt for coming on and spending so much of his time. As he mentioned, he's got a lot of things in the works, a new Emery album, and he's also very busy at the Bad Christian podcast. You can find all the info at badchristian.com, or you can go to this week's show page. I will be linking all of his necessary socials and websites there as well. If you would like to stay up to date with us, here are all the ways you can do so. You can go to our website at www.voiceandversepodcast.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/voiceandversepodcast, or Twitter at voiceversepod. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. All of those links will be included on this week's show page on our website. So go do that. If you like what you hear, please leave us a good review. 5 stars would be awesome. Tell your friends about the show, and then come back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Voice and Verse podcast, when we uncover more of the stories behind your favorite songs. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you soon.